And out front, CNN political commentator Mark Lamont Hill and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Thanks for coming on. Sheriff Clarke, this is horrific what happened, obviously. But do you think it is fair to link this murder to the Black Lives Matter movement when we still don't know the suspect's motive?
I think it's very fair in light of the anti-cop rhetoric that is sweeping the United States of America, fueled by this group, some of the vulgar, vile, vicious rhetoric that's coming out, talking about killing cops, and that's just some of the nice stuff, some of the stuff I can't even say here on TV. But there is no doubt in my mind that the two New York officers, Ramos and Lou, who were gunned down by an individual who made Facebook postings about wanting to kill pigs, and he was going to go out and hunt officers down. There have been officers across the United States who've had their cruisers shot at and struck while they patrolled. St. Louis, the same thing. Yes, this is part of a pattern now, and you'd have to stick your head in the sand to think that this thing here wasn't fueled by this vile, vulgar, slimy movement.
Mark?
I disagree with your characterization of BLM, but I'd be curious to ask you, do you think that every cop who's been killed this year is connected somehow, the death is connected to BLM?
No, but there's an increase in assaults on police officers, the killings of police officers that may not be directly related to this movement, but you know what, there's no fear anymore about assaulting or attacking, fighting, disarming, or generally, like I said, assaulting law enforcement officers. And you know what? If the shoe fits, wear it. Just like the Dylan Roof, right, who went into a church and slaughtered 9 churchgoers and every white person in America by this Black Lies movement, L-I-E-S, was indicted because of that. And other people came out and talked about slavery, discrimination, alive and well in the United States. Well, that's why I said if the shoe fits here, wear it.
Right. I'm glad that you're saying if the shoe fits, because as a police officer, I would hope you would want to emphasize things like probable cause, due suspicion, investigation. The police officials...
Darren Wilson didn't get that, Mark.
Let me finish.
You know that. The officers in the Freddie Gray case did not get that assumption of innocence. So for you to stand up and throw that out now, it's
Sheriff, I haven't said... All right, I'll let you finish.
It's hypocritical.
All right.
It's hypocritical. The police officers in the Freddie Gray case didn't get that presumption of innocence.
All right, I've let you speak the entire
Darren
segment.
Wilson
Just let me respond.
didn't get that presumption of innocence.
Please let me respond. By law, we're entitled to a presumption of innocence. Even if you think that those people didn't get what they deserved, as a police officer, I hope you wouldn't say, well, 2 wrongs make a right. If anything, we should be emphasizing due process and investigation here. And in this case, the people handling the case in Texas themselves have said very clearly, we don't know the motive. So you're essentially saying that your colleagues in law enforcement who say we don't know the motive are wrong and that you do know the motive. The second piece I want to say is that your characterization of Black Lives Matter is absolutely incorrect. The argument of Black Lives Matter is not to say that police officers should be killed, that police officers should be demonized, that police officers should be marginalized. The argument of Black Lives Matter is that police officers should be held to standards of accountability just like everybody else, and the increased number of black bodies, or the sustained number of black bodies which die at the hands of state violence, needs to end. It means that while we regard all lives, we cannot exclude black lives.
What about the black victims that die at the hands of other black people? That doesn't seem to matter. And they're dying by the thousands, not by the few rare instances of the police use of force.
But let me ask you this, Sheriff Clarke. I mean, just looking at the numbers here, if we're going to bring that up, there were 24 unarmed African Americans killed by police this year. That's according to the Washington Post. So when you take that into account, Sheriff Clarke, do you think that African Americans, people part of this protest, have a right to have their voices heard and to protest?
It's not a matter of whether they have a right. It's a matter of whether it's legitimate. There are 104 homicides in the city of Milwaukee right now. I think there were 79 last year. Baltimore, 214. They've already matched all of 2014. So when you want to take that 24, I'm not saying that that none of that is legitimate in terms of taking a look at them, but how many of them were ruled justifiable? How many of the uses of force were determined to be reasonable and justifiable? And then let's compare that 24 to the number of stops made by police officers during that time period, and you'll find that that is a very, very fractional percentage
Yeah,
of deaths that occur at the hands of police officers. That's what the data shows anyway.
I've been pretty active, both following, covering, and as a protester being engaged in these struggles, and I've never seen anyone in the Black Lives Matter movement or any other principled movement against police violence say that most police stops result in unlawful executions or unlawful shootings or even unlawful violence. The argument is that it happens too often, and when it does, we don't have sufficient mechanisms of accountability. Let me finish.
What's too often?
Let me finish. Well, anytime someone gets killed unlawfully or a police officer acts as judge, jury, and executioner, it's too many. I would hope you would agree that even one would be too many. But we've seen dozens of them.
Well, that's a mischaracterization right there, that every time a law enforcement officer has to use force, they're acting as judge, jury, and executioner.
I didn't say that. Hold on. I did not say that.
Let's apply the facts of the case to the rule of law.
Okay.
And if the rule of law
but Sheriff, I didn't say that.
gives the benefit of the doubt to the officer.
You're just making arguments here, and I didn't say that. What I said is, under the circumstances when that is the case, one is too many. I didn't say that every time it happens, that's the case. I'm saying under the circumstances.
But emotion and anecdote are not facts, Mark.
They're not anecdotes. They're strong evidence here. The problem is police officers are the overseers, and so you all decide what cases are legitimate and which ones aren't. That in and of itself is a problem, and that's what we're trying to deal with.
And by the way, though, just to give the other side of the stats, Sheriff Goforth is the 25th officer, person in uniform killed just this year. 24 unarmed black men. He is the 25th officer to be killed. Way too many on both sides.
No,
I think
that's not the same thing,
we can all agree.
If being black and outside presents the same danger as being a police officer who signs up for a dangerous job, that's pretty scary. Can you imagine if just being black
justification for them to lose their lives, like
nobody
Officer
should die.
Goforth?
Nobody, no, that's
defenseless.
I think we
shot
can all
to the back of
agree
the head and had
nobody
a
should
Nobody
die.
should die. You're just playing to the cheap seats. Nobody should die.
Lamont Hill, David
I didn't
Clarke,
sign up for
thank you
that,
for
and I
this
don't send men and women
lively
out every day
discussion.
to serve their communities to end up with that as the result.
I hope not.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.